Part 1. The discovery in the storm. Wind howled like a wild animal across the frozen mountains. Snow fell so thick that Jake couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead of his snowmobile. He should have turned back an hour ago, but something kept pushing him forward. Maybe it was his stubborn nature, or maybe it was the strange feeling in his gut that someone needed help. Jake had been living alone in these mountains for 3 years now, after his divorce. He bought a small cabin and started working as a volunteer rescue worker. Most people thought he was crazy for choosing such an isolated life. But Jake found peace in the silence of the wilderness. He knew every trail, every dangerous cliff, and every safe shelter within 50 miles. Tonight felt different though. The storm had come out of nowhere, turning what should have been a routine supply run into a battle for survival. His radio crackled with static, and even his GPS was acting strange. The needle kept spinning like it couldn't figure out which way was north. That's when he heard it. At first, Jake thought it was just the wind playing tricks on his ears. But as he slowed his snowmobile and turned off the engine, he heard it again. Voices. Definitely voices. Someone was calling for help, and they sounded desperate. "Hello," Jake shouted into the storm. "Where are you?" The voices came again, but they sounded weird. The words weren't quite right, like someone trying to speak English but not getting it perfect. Jake grabbed his flashlight and started walking in the direction of the sounds. His boots crunched through knee-deep snow, and the cold bit at his face like tiny needles. "Keep calling," he yelled. "I'm coming to find you." The voices got louder, and Jake could tell there were 2 people. They sounded young, maybe in their 20s, and scared. Really scared. He pushed through a thick patch of pine trees and stumbled into a small clearing. His flashlight beam swept across the area until it caught something. That made him stop dead in his tracks. 2 figures were half buried in a snowdrift near some old mining equipment. At first glance, they looked like regular people, 2 young women with dark hair. But something was off, even from 20 feet away. Jake could see that their skin seemed to glow softly in the beam of his flashlight. Not like they were covered in glitter or makeup, but like they had their own internal light. "Hey, are you okay?" Jake called out as he rushed toward them. Neither of them answered. They were unconscious, their faces pale and lips turning blue. From the cold, Jake dropped to his knees beside them and checked for pulses. Both were alive, but their heartbeats felt strange, too fast, with an odd rhythm he'd never felt before. The older-looking woman stirred as Jake touched her wrist. Her eyes fluttered open, and Jake almost fell backward in surprise. Her eyes were beautiful, but definitely not normal. They were larger than regular human eyes, and they seemed to hold depths of color that shifted like looking into deep water. "Please," she whispered, her voice carrying an accent Jake couldn't place. "Help, sister. Don't worry," Jake said, trying to sound calm even though his mind was racing. "I'm going to get both of you out of here." He looked more closely at their clothes. They were wearing some kind of fitted outfits that looked like they were made from material he'd never seen before. The fabric seemed to shimmer and change color slightly in his flashlight beam. Whatever it was, it clearly wasn't designed for a Montana blizzard. Jake had to make a quick decision. The storm was getting worse, and these 2 would freeze to death if he didn't act fast. He ran back to his snowmobile and pulled out the emergency sled he always carried. It took him several trips to get both women loaded onto it safely. The ride back to his cabin was the longest 20 minutes of Jake's life. The snow was coming down so hard, he could barely see his own headlight, and he was terrified he might hit a tree or drive off a cliff. The women on the sled behind him stayed unconscious, which worried him even more. Finally, the warm glow of his cabin windows appeared through the storm. Jake had never been so happy to see home in his life. He parked the snowmobile right next to his front door and carefully carried the first woman inside. She was surprisingly light, and her skin felt warm despite being buried in snow for who knows how long. Jake laid her on his couch near the fireplace, then went back for her sister. This one was smaller and looked younger, maybe 19 or 20. As he carried her inside, she opened her eyes for just a moment. Those same large, Otherworldly eyes looked up at him with what seemed like gratitude before closing again. He covered both women with every blanket he owned and built up the fire until it was roaring. Jake had basic first aid training from his rescue work, but he never dealt with anything like this. The women's vital signs were stable but strange. Their breathing was too shallow, and their body temperature seemed higher than normal, even though they'd been nearly frozen. While they slept, Jake studied them more carefully, up close. It was obvious they weren't entirely human. Their bone structure was slightly different, more delicate somehow. Their hair had an unusual texture, almost like silk, and those glowing patches on their skin were definitely not makeup or some kind of medical condition. The older woman woke up first. She sat up slowly, looking around Jake's cabin with wide eyes. When she saw him sitting in his chair across the room, she didn't seem afraid. Instead, she placed her hand over her heart and said something in a language that sounded like music. "Thank you," she said in careful English. "You saved us." "What's your name?" Jake asked gently. "I'm Lyra," she replied. "This is my sister, Zara. We were traveling when the storm caught us." Jake noticed how she hesitated on the word traveling, like she was choosing it carefully from a list of options. "Where were you traveling from?" he asked. "The nearest town is 60 miles away, and there's no way you could have walked that far in this weather." Lyra's eyes darted away from his. "Our vehicle broke down. We tried to find shelter, but—" She gestured helplessly. Just then, Zara stirred and opened her eyes. When she saw Jake, she smiled, the most beautiful smile he'd ever seen. She said something to Lyra in that musical language, and Lyra nodded. "My sister says you have a kind face," Lyra translated. "She wants to know if we can stay until the storm passes." Jake looked out his window at the blizzard, which showed no signs of stopping. "Of course, you're welcome to stay as long as you need to." As the evening went on, Jake made them soup and hot tea. He noticed they ate very carefully, like they weren't sure what human food would taste like. They seemed amazed by simple things, the way his electric lights worked, the sound of his radio, even the texture of his wooden table. "Where exactly are you from?" Jake asked as they sat around his fireplace. The sisters exchanged a look. "Very far north," Lyra said finally, "a small settlement. Most people have never heard of it." Jake didn't push for more details, but he had a feeling there was much more to their story. As the night wore on and the storm continued to rage outside, he found himself strangely comfortable with these mysterious visitors. There was something about them that made him feel less alone than he had in years. Little did Jake know that his quiet life in the mountains was about to become the most extraordinary adventure he could ever imagine. Part 2, Secrets Revealed and Growing Bond. Storm lasted 3 whole days. Jake had never seen anything like it in all his years living in the mountains. The wind shook his cabin so hard that he worried the roof might blow off, and the snow piled up past his windows. But inside, something amazing was happening. Lyra and Zara were nothing like any people Jake had ever met. On the second morning, he woke up to find them both standing in his kitchen, staring at his coffee maker like it was some kind of magical device. "How does it make the water hot without fire?" Zara asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Jake couldn't help but smile. "It's called electricity. Power runs through wires in the walls." The sisters looked at each other and started talking in their musical language. Jake was getting used to the sound of it now. It reminded him of wind chimes mixed with bird songs. "We have never seen anything like this," Lyra admitted. "Our home is very different." Over breakfast, Jake noticed more strange things about his guests. They both ate very small amounts, like they didn't need much food to feel full. And whenever they touched something metal, his spoons, the door handle, even his old radio, it would start working better than it had in years. "That's weird," Jake muttered when his broken kitchen timer suddenly started keeping perfect time. After Zara picked it up, "What is weird?" she asked. Looking worried. "Nothing bad," Jake said quickly. "Just unusual." By the third day, Jake was starting to feel like he'd known the sisters his whole life. Lyra was clearly the older one, always looking out for Zara and making sure she was okay. She was smart and careful with her words, like she was always thinking. 3 steps ahead, Zara was different, more curious and trusting. She asked questions about everything and seemed to find joy in the smallest things. "Jake," Zara said on that 3rd afternoon, "why do you live alone in this place?" The question caught him off guard. He was chopping wood outside while the sisters watched from the window, and he'd been enjoying their company so much that he'd forgotten how lonely his life usually was. "I guess I just like the quiet," he said, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't the whole truth anymore. That's when everything changed. As Jake brought his axe down on a particularly stubborn piece of wood, it slipped. The blade caught the side of his hand, opening up a deep cut that immediately started bleeding heavily. "Oh no," he said, dropping the axe and pressing his other hand against the wound. Before he could even think about going inside for his first aid kit, Zara was there. She must have moved faster than any human possibly could, because 1 second she was at the window and the next she was kneeling beside him in the snow. "Let me help," she said softly. "It's okay, I just need to." But Zara had already taken his injured hand in both of hers. Jake felt a warm, tingling sensation that started in his fingers and spread up his arm. The pain disappeared completely, and when Zara let go of his hand, the cut was gone. Not healed, gone, like it had never happened. Jake stared at his hand, then at Zara, then back at his hand. "How did you?" Zara's face went pale. She looked toward the cabin where Lyra was standing in the doorway, and the 2 sisters had another one of their rapid conversations in their own language. "We cannot hide anymore," Lyra said finally, walking over to them. "He has seen." "Hide what?" Jake asked, though part of him already knew the answer was going to change everything. Lyra took a deep breath. "We are not from your world, Jake. We are from a place very far away, so far that your people have never seen it, not even with your strongest telescopes." Jake sat down heavily on his chopping block. "You mean like another planet, yes?" Zara said quietly. "Our ship crashed in your mountains during the storm. We were trying to find help when you found us. For a long moment, nobody said anything." Jake looked at the 2 sisters, these beautiful, strange, wonderful people who had brought so much life to his lonely cabin, and tried to process what they'd just told him. "Are there more of you?" he asked finally. "Yes," Lyra said, "but we're separated from the others. Our communication device was damaged in the crash. And you can heal people?" Zara nodded. "Among other things. Our people have abilities that yours do not." Jake stood up and walked a few steps away, running his hands through his hair. This was impossible. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like him. But as he looked back at Lyra and Zara, he realized something important. He didn't care if it was impossible. "Are you going to leave?" he asked. "When your people find you?" The sisters looked at each other again. "We do not know," Lyra said honestly. "Our mission was to explore this world and report back to our leaders. But what? But we have never felt anything like what we feel here," Zara said, her cheeks turning slightly pink. With you, over the next few hours, Jake learned more about Lyra and Zara's people. They call themselves Etherians, and they came from a dying world. Small groups have been sent out to find new places where their people might be able to live. Most of the time, they observed from a distance and moved on. But something had gone wrong with their ship's navigation system during a solar storm. "In our culture," Lyra explained as they sat around the fire that evening, "when someone saves our life, we form a bond with them. It is not something we choose. It simply happens." "What kind of bond?" Jake asked. "A deep connection," Zara said. Like they become part of our family." Jake looked at both of them, these incredible women who had literally fallen from the stars into his life. "And you both feel this bond with me?" They nodded. Double quotes "among our people." Lyra said carefully, "Sisters often share important things. We do not like to be separated, especially from those we care about." Jake was starting to understand what they meant, and it should have scared him a week ago. His biggest concern was whether he had enough firewood to last the winter. Now he was sitting with 2 aliens who were telling him they cared about him in ways he'd never experienced before. The strange thing was, He cared about them too, more than he cared about anyone in a very long time. So what happens now? He asked. Now, Lyra said, we wait for the storm to end, and then we see what choices we all want to make. Outside, the wind was finally starting to calm down, but inside Jake's cabin, everything was just beginning. Part 3. Love in an unlikely placid morning after the storm finally ended. Jake woke up to the smell of something incredible cooking in his kitchen. He stumbled out of his bedroom to find Lyra and Zara working together to make breakfast, but they were using ingredients he'd never seen before. Where did you get those? He asked, pointing to some silver-colored berries they were adding to what looked like pancake batter. From our emergency supplies, Zara said with a bright smile. We wanted to cook something for you. To say thank you, Jake took a bite of the finished pancakes and his eyes went wide. They tasted like nothing he'd ever experienced, sweet and savory at the same time, with flavors that seemed to change as he chewed. This is amazing, he said. What are those berries? They grow on our home world, Lyra explained. We brought some with us in case we got stranded somewhere. As they ate together, Jake realized how natural this felt, having the sisters here. Sharing meals and conversation made his cabin feel like a real home for the first time in years. He'd been so focused on being alone that he'd forgotten how good it felt to have people to care about. Jake, Zara said suddenly, can you show us more of your world today, now that the storm is over? Of course, he said, but we should probably stay close to the cabin. Just in case your people are looking for you. They spent the day exploring the area around Jake's home. He showed them the frozen lake where he liked to fish in the summer, the old abandoned mine where he sometimes found interesting rocks, and the hill where you could see 4 miles in every direction. The sisters were fascinated by everything. Zara collected snow in her hands and laughed when it melted, like she'd never seen anything so wonderful. Lyra asked detailed questions about how the trees survived the winter, and why some animals hibernated while others stayed active. On our world, Lyra explained as they walked, the seasons are very different. We have long periods of light and long periods of darkness, but the temperature stays mostly the same. That sounds lonely, Jake said. It was, Zara said quietly. That's why we volunteered to come explore new worlds. We wanted to see something different. As the day went on, Jake noticed that he kept catching himself looking at both sisters in ways that surprised him. Lyra had this quiet strength that made him feel safe and calm. When she smiled, which wasn't often, it felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. Zara was different, full of energy and curiosity, always touching things and asking questions. Her laugh made him feel younger than he had in years. The weird part was, he could tell they were both looking at him the same way. That evening, as they sat around the fire again, Lyra brought up something that had been on Jake's mind all day. Jake, she said carefully, we need to tell you more about our customs, about how our people form relationships, okay? Jake said, though he wasn't sure he was ready for this conversation. When Etherians find someone who shows us great kindness, Zara said, especially someone who saves our lives, we develop very strong feelings for them. It happens quickly, and it's very powerful. Both of you? Jake asked. They nodded. And that doesn't cause problems between you two. I mean, Lyra and Zara exchanged one of their looks. In our culture, Lyra said, sisters are never separated from each other or from the people they care about. We share everything important in our lives. Jake felt his face getting warm, including relationships. If that is what everyone wants, Zara said simply. Jake stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. A week ago, his biggest relationship problem was deciding whether to get a dog for company. Now he was having feelings for 2 alien sisters who apparently had feelings for him too. And they were talking about some kind of arrangement he'd never even imagined. This is crazy, he said, but he wasn't sure if he meant it in a good way or a bad way. Are you upset? Lyra asked, and Jake could hear real worry in her voice. He turned around to look at them. They were sitting close together on his couch, holding hands the way sisters do when they're nervous. Both of them were watching him with those beautiful, otherworldly eyes, and Jake realized something that shocked him. He wasn't upset. He was scared, but not upset. I don't know how this is supposed to work, he said honestly. Neither do we, Zara admitted. We have never felt this way about someone from another world before. Jake sat back down, but this time he sat between them instead of in his chair. So what do? We take it slow, Lyra said. We learn about each other. We see if this feeling is real or just because of the unusual situation. Over the next few days, that's exactly what they did. Jake taught the sisters how to chop wood and build fires. They showed him some of their technology, small devices that could purify water instantly or generate heat without any fuel. Zara turned out to have an artistic side, creating beautiful sculptures from ice and snow that seemed to glow with their own light. Lyra was more practical, figuring out ways to improve Jake's cabin with small repairs and modifications. Jake found himself falling into an easy rhythm with both of them in the mornings. He and Lyra would plan the day's activities while Zara made breakfast in the afternoons. Zara would show him new things she'd discovered around the cabin while Lyra worked on their damaged communication device. In the evenings, all three of them would talk about their different worlds and what they hoped for in the future. The strange thing was, it didn't feel awkward or complicated. It felt right in a way Jake couldn't explain. One night, as they were getting ready for bed, Zara asked him something that made his heart skip a beat. Jake, she said, in your culture, when people care about each other very much, what do they call each other? Well, Jake said slowly, it depends on how much they care. Friends, partners, boyfriend and girlfriend, married couples. What do married couples call each other? Husband and wife. Lyra and Zara looked at each other and had one of their silent conversations. Then Lyra turned back to him. If we stayed here, she said, if we chose to make our life with you instead of returning to our people, would you want us to call you husband? Jake's mouth went dry. Are you asking me to marry both of you? We are asking if you would want that, Zara said. Someday, if we all decided it was right. Jake looked at these two incredible women who had changed his entire world in just 1 week. The idea should have terrified him. Instead, it filled him with a warmth he'd never felt before. Yeah, he said quietly, I think I would want that. The smiles that spread across their faces were brighter than any star Jake had ever seen. Part 4, Challenges and Choices. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning. 2 weeks after Jake had found the sisters in the snowdrift. He was outside splitting wood when he heard a sound he'd never heard before, a deep, musical humming that seemed to come from the sky itself. Lyra and Zara came running out of the cabin, their faces filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. They found us, Lyra said, looking up at the cloudy sky. Who found you? Jake asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Our people, Zara whispered. The rescue team. Within minutes, 3 figures appeared through the trees. They looked similar to Lyra and Zara, with the same glowing skin and large eyes. But they were taller and moved with a kind of authority that made Jake nervous. The one in front was clearly the leader, a stern-looking man, who Jake guessed was probably in his 30s. The leader spoke rapidly to Lyra and Zara in their musical language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clearly not happy. Lyra responded in the same language, gesturing toward Jake several times. What's going on? Jake asked. The leader turned to him and spoke in perfect English, though his accent was much stronger than the sisters. I am Kale, brother to these two. You are the human who found them. Yes, Jake said. Jake, Kale looked him up and down, like he was inspecting a piece of broken equipment. My sisters tell me you have been caring for them. They saved my life, Jake said. It was the least I could do. Indeed, Kale's expression didn't change. We are grateful for your assistance. However, we must leave immediately. Our ship is prepared for departure. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Leave? To go where? To our new colony world, Kale said. Our home planet is dying. All survivors must relocate to ensure the continuation of our species. Jake looked at Lyra and Zara, hoping one of them would say something, but they both looked torn between their brother and him. How long do they have? Jake asked. We depart in 3 days. Cale said firmly, the colony ship cannot wait longer. That evening, after Cale and the other rescuers had set up a temporary camp nearby, Jake sat with the sisters by their fire. None of them seemed to know what to say. You have to go. Jake said finally, your people need you. But what about what we need? Zara asked, tears forming in her unusual eyes. Your brother is right, Jake continued, even though every word felt like swallowing glass. You can't abandon your entire species for one human. You are not just one human, Lyra said. Firmly, you are the person we choose to be with, the person we love. Jake's heart skipped at the word love, but he forced himself to stay practical. And I love both of you too. But love sometimes means making hard choices. The next day brought even more complications. Jake's radio, which had been quiet for weeks, suddenly crackled to life. Jake, this is Tom from Mountain Rescue. Are you there? We've been trying to reach you for days. Jake grabbed the radio. I'm here, Tom. What's going on? We've got some government people asking questions about unusual energy readings in your area. They want to send a team up to investigate. I told them the roads are still bad from the storm, but they're pretty insistent. Jake's blood ran cold. He looked at Lyra and Zara, who had gone pale. How long do I have? Jake asked. Maybe 2 days before they can get equipment up there, Tom said. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, Jake lied. Just cabin fever from being snowed in so long. When he turned off the radio, Cale was standing in the doorway. He'd heard everything. This complicates matters, Cale said. If your government discovers us, it could cause problems for both our peoples. Then you need to leave sooner, Jake said. We cannot leave sooner. The ship needs more time to prepare for the long journey. Cale studied Jake's face. Unless. What unless you come with us? Jake stared at him. What? Our colony world has conditions similar to your Earth, Cale explained. We could use someone with your survival skills and knowledge of harsh environments. And he glanced at his sisters. It would solve the problem of separation. You would really let me come? Jake asked. If you prove your commitment to our people and to my sisters, yes. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He walked outside and looked up at the stars, wondering which one might become his new home. The idea was terrifying and exciting at the same time. Zara found him there an hour later. What are you thinking about? She asked. Everything, Jake said honestly. My whole life is here. My cabin, my work, the few friends I have. If I leave with you, I can never come back. And if you stay, we will never see each other again, Zara said softly. I know. They stood in silence for a while, watching the stars. Zara, Jake said finally. What's your new world like? Beautiful, she said. Mountains like these, but with 2 moons. Forests that glow at night, and the sunsets, she smiled. I think you would love the sunsets. The next morning, Cale presented Jake with more information about their colony world. It turned out the Etherians had been planning for this move for decades, carefully choosing a planet that could support both their people and others who might join them. We are not just refugees, Cale explained. We are pioneers. We want to build something better than what we left behind, and humans would be welcome there. The right humans, yes, those who can contribute to our community and respect our ways. Jake spent the day thinking about everyone he would leave behind. His ex-wife, who probably wouldn't even notice he was gone. His few friends from the rescue service, who would miss him but would understand that he needed a fresh start. His parents, who had died years ago. The truth was, except for his work helping stranded travelers, Jake didn't have much keeping him on Earth. I want to do it, he told Lyra and Zara that evening. I want to come with you. The joy on their faces made his decision feel absolutely right. But Cale held up a hand. There is one more thing you must understand. Once we leave, there is no going back. The journey takes years, and we do not have the resources for return trips. Jake nodded. I understand, and you must be prepared to become truly part of our community. That means learning our ways, contributing to our survival, and accepting that my sister's happiness is now tied to yours. I'm ready for that, Jake said. Cale studied him for a long moment. then nodded slowly. Then we begin preparations tomorrow. We leave at sunset the day after. As Jake looked at Lyra and Zara, both of them glowing with happiness, he realized his old life was already over. His new life was about to begin. Part 5. A new beginning. Final day arrived faster than Jake had expected. He stood in his cabin one last time, looking round at the life he was about to leave behind forever. His coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter, his favorite chair. Faced the fireplace where he'd spent so many quiet evenings. Everything looked exactly the same. But Jake felt like a completely different person. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked softly from the doorway. Jake picked up the small bag he'd packed. Just a few photos, his grandfather's watch, and some tools he thought might be useful on an alien world. "Everything else would stay behind, as ready as I'll ever be," he said. But before they could leave, Zara came running in with news that changed everything. "Jake, come quickly. Kale has something important to show you." Outside, Kale was holding a device that looked like a cross between a radio and a crystal. It was glowing and making soft musical sounds. "What is it?" Jake asked. "Communication from our colony ship," Kale said, his usually stern expression showing excitement. "They have been monitoring your planet's broadcasts and learning about your people, and they want to invite more humans to join our colony. Not just you, but others who have skills we need." Jake stared at him. "You mean other people from Earth?" "Yes. Our leaders have decided that diversity makes communities stronger. They are particularly interested in people like you, those who understand survival, rescue work, and building in harsh environments." Zara grabbed Jake's arm. "Do you know what this means? You would not be the only human there." Jake felt a weight he didn't even know he'd been carrying lift off his shoulders. The idea of being the only human on an alien world had been scary, even though he'd been willing to do it for Lyra and Zara. "How many humans are we talking about?" he asked. "Perhaps 50 to start," Kale said. "Carefully chosen individuals who can contribute to our society and help bridge the gap between our peoples." As they walked toward the temporary landing site, where the rescue ship waited, Jake saw something that took his breath away. The ship wasn't the small, sleek vessel he'd been imagining. It was beautiful, like a giant crystal that seemed to grow out of the ground, glowing with soft blue light. "It's incredible," Jake whispered. "Wait until you see the colony ship," Zara said with a grin. The rescue ship's interior was unlike anything Jake could have imagined. The walls seemed to be alive, pulsing gently with light, and the floor felt warm under his feet. There were no seats. Instead, there were curved areas that seemed to mold themselves to fit whoever sat in them. "How does it work?" Jake asked as they prepared for takeoff. "Our technology is based on living systems," Lyra explained. "The ship grows rather than being built. It responds to our needs and thoughts." Jake felt a strange tingling sensation as the ship lifted off, but there was no sound of engines or feeling of acceleration. One moment they were on the ground, and the next they were rising smoothly into the sky, through a wall that had become transparent. Jake watched his cabin grow smaller and smaller below them. For a moment, he felt a pang of sadness for the life he was leaving behind. Then Zara took his hand, and Lyra took his other hand, and the sadness was replaced by excitement for what lay ahead. The journey to the colony ship took only an hour, but it felt like traveling into a dream as they approached what looked like a small moon hanging in space. Jake realized it wasn't a moon at all. It was their new home. "The colony ship," Kale announced, "home to 10,000 Etherians and soon to be home to our first human residents." Jake pressed his face to the transparent wall, trying to take in the massive structure before them. It looked like a combination of a city and a garden, with buildings that curved and flowed like living things, connected by streams of light. "People live there?" Jake asked in amazement. "We do now," Lyra said. "And so do you?" The next few hours were a blur of introductions and explanations. Jake met the colony leaders, who welcomed him warmly and asked detailed questions about Earth's environments and survival techniques. He learned that the journey to their new world would take 3 years. But the colony ship was equipped with everything they needed: schools, workshops, gardens, and recreational areas. "It's like a floating city," Jake told Lyra and Zara as they showed him to his new quarters. Our new home, Zara corrected him. That evening, there was a ceremony to welcome Jake officially into their community. It wasn't exactly a wedding, but it was close, a celebration of the bond between him and the sisters, and their commitment to build a life together. Standing in a beautiful garden area of the ship, surrounded by glowing plants from the Etherian home world, Jake made promises he never thought he'd make. He promised to learn their ways, to contribute to their community, and to love and protect Lyra and Zara for as long as he lived. The sisters made their own promises to help him adapt to their world, to bridge the gap between their peoples, and to create a family unlike any that had existed before. When the ceremony was over and they were finally alone in their shared living space, Jake looked at his new wives and felt a happiness he'd never known was possible. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now we start our new life," Lyra said. Together, Zara added, "all three of us," as the colony ship began its long journey toward their new world. Jake stood at the observation deck looking out at the stars. Somewhere behind them was Earth, growing smaller every second. Somewhere ahead was a planet he'd never seen, where he would help build a new kind of society. But right here, right now, with Lyra and Zara beside him and their hands in his, Jake had everything he needed. 6 months into the journey, Jake received a message that made him smile. It was from Tom at Mountain Rescue, sent through channels Jake didn't fully understand, but that the Etherians had arranged. "Jake, I don't know where you went, but I hope you found what you were looking for. Your cabin burned down in a gas leak explosion, but somehow I don't think you'll mind. Take care of yourself, wherever you are." Jake deleted the message and looked around at his new life. He was teaching survival skills to young Etherians, learning to grow alien plants in the ship's gardens. And every evening he came home to 2 incredible women who called him husband. He had found exactly what he was looking for, even though he'd never known he was looking for it. Sometimes the best rescues, Jake realized, happen when you're trying to save someone else and end up saving yourself instead. And sometimes love finds you in the most impossible places, like a snowdrift on a lonely mountain, or in the warm home of 2 sisters from the stars.